Well, welcome back to Cyber Budo, and today we're going to be going through the first part of a series of the cyber kill chain. Now, the cyber kill chain by Lockheed Martin is a very interesting and fundamentally crucial subject in cybersecurity. It says here, developed by Lockheed Martin, the cyber kill chain framework is part of the intelligence-driven defense model for identification and prevention of cyber intrusions activity. The model identifies what the adversaries must complete in order to achieve their objective. Now, there's a lot of nuance to this, and for the sake of time and brevity, we are not going to go super detailed. However, in a nutshell, as a defensive analyst or as a penetration tester, it's your job to understand threat actor activity, right? And every threat actor, whether it be inside threat actors or whether it be advanced persistent threats, state-sponsored cyber criminals, they all have an objective. They all have a goal. We don't know what their goal is. However, their activity and what we capture in the logs generally gives us some indication of what it is that they may be after. And there are various stages along the way that we can detect. So the general flow is that the threat actor will start off with a reconnaissance phase, and that's the phase we're going to focus on today. Also, you have weaponization. After they've gathered enough intel, they'll formulate a weapon that will act as, the thing that's going to get them to the delivery phase, right? Now, one of the most common methods of delivery is emails, phishing, right? Exploitation. What is the exploit that they're going to try and carry out? Is it a credential harvester? Is it some kind of malware? The next is installation. Can they get it installed? Next is command and control. Can they get this malware to phone back to their command and control C2, as we call it? And then we have ultimately the hands actions on objectives. So again, simplistic, and there's a lot of nuance to this, but this is incredibly important to understand whether you're in offensive security or whether you're a defensive analyst. If you don't understand kill chain, if you don't understand tactics, you're kind of operating blind. You can be very, very technical, but the security aspect of the job requires you to understand that there's a process, and it's not always methodical. The process isn't always going to be linear. In fact, in the reconnaissance phase, you might not even know that a threat actor or whatever is actually even targeting your organization to begin with. And we're going to break down now into a little bit more detail about how the reconnaissance phase works. All right. Now, in order to do this, I'm going to use a little bit of an analogy, okay? So the analogy I'm going to use is that of the Shinobi, okay? The Japanese Shinobi during like the Edo periods, we always associated a ninja with just being an assassin and a warrior, and they were skilled at killing, but their job, for the most part, was espionage. What they did was, a large part of their work was reconnaissance, blending in the background, trying to go unnoticed. And in fact, much of the time, a Shinobi would pretend to be a peasant, a farmer, maybe a musician, and they would hide and no one would know they're there. But beneath the surface, they were taking notes of supply chain routes, defenses, towers, open gates, secret entrances, important people, well-known people, generals, people that could be captured, killed, manipulated, bribed, assassinated, whatever. They would take note of all this and feed that back to the person who'd hired them. Now, while we're not living in feudal Japan, a lot of what we learn from the Shinobi is applicable today. And in fact, espionage is a complete deep topic within itself. Now, I don't claim to be some kind of espionage expert, but in cybersecurity, you need to become familiar with threat actor activities and reconnaissance. You need to know this because, if you're helping or working for an organization, you need to be aware of where the organization's vulnerable, where they have weak spots. Now, depending on your role, you might not be expected to know this fully, but if you're a consultant or someone who is helping the organization do full coverage, then there's a lot of things that you would be expected to know. Much like the Shinobi one, while we're not living in that time, there is modern ways that people can find all the information they want. And in fact, now more than ever, it is probably easier than it ever has been to gain information, right? The same way the ninja would infiltrate a castle or a building to set it on fire, to let armies in, to assassinate, threat actors look for open ports. They look for HR executives. They look for important individuals that they can manipulate, that they can use a tactic called social engineering, right? Manipulating their way in, sending a phishing email, gathering as much information they can from online tools such as Google, using a Whois or DNS records, Shodan, Census. Social media has become one of the richest forms of information there is, that people freely and openly share without giving any thought or consideration to what they're exactly sharing. Maybe they've gone on holidays for the week. Maybe they've just given away the first school they ever went to, or their first pet's name. Maybe they have divulged too much information about their career or about their responsibilities at work, sharing their security badge. All these things can create a big problem. Companies, individuals publishing to GitHub codes and company secrets, jobs posting, and leaked data. All this stuff is open and available a lot of the time on the internet for free. And threat actors can use passive reconnaissance to comb all this information and to use tools like Multigo and other information collecting apps to build up a picture or build and correlate all this activity into actionable information that they can now go and execute. Remember that a threat actor's goal is to get to their objective, whatever that is, and they will use and exploit whatever method they can or whoever they can in order to get there. CEOs are, they are publicly disclosed that they are CEOs. We know who they are, and this is why these individuals are highly targeted, because they have a lot to lose and they have very high privileges in the organization. So we always will see threat actors targeting high profile individuals. Threat actors want to know what technology is used. What are the defenses? Where are the weaknesses? Something that we've seen a lot lately is that threat actors are just going straight to the help desk and getting the password reset. Social engineering is and will continue to be one of the biggest problems and struggles that cybersecurity professionals face, because it's the manipulation of humans. Defenses and security tools that are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, even millions, they are tight and they are good and they're hard to bypass. But if someone hands you the keys, you don't need to hack these systems, which is why a lot of the activity has gone to, firstly, social engineering and manipulation, and the other is going to actually just bribing and offering people money to let you in. The second phase of reconnaissance is active. Once you have a fair idea of how you're going to go about it, you've gathered enough information, you have to move to the next phase, okay? And the next phase is active. The problem now with active is that the risk of getting caught now becomes slightly higher. So basically, in summary, passive and active reconnaissance. Passive is the art of gathering information without interacting with the target. Okay, if the target finds out that you're watching or that you're interacting with them, then you are compromised. Okay, and that is the same in history as it is the same now. Threat actors will want to gather as much information as they can through what is called OSINT. open source intelligence, right? It's free, it's available, anyone can see it. Which leads to the active phase, right? Which is the port scanning, the interacting, going on site, snooping around. The risk of getting caught gets much higher. However, that's inevitably the next phase into coming up to the next phase of the kill chain, which is weaponization, which we'll talk about in the next video. So thank you for listening to part 1. We're going to go into part 2, weaponization. We're going to go into a little more detail about that. Now, just to keep in mind that what we're talking about and discussing, should be used responsibly. Okay, doxing, threatening, harassing, stalking, they're all crimes. So, be skillful and mindful of these tools and open source intelligence. Correlating information on people can or could be illegal and just weird if you're doing it for no particular reason. You should also not be using these tools and tactics to essentially track down criminals or people who might be part of criminal syndicates or missing people without the guidance or oversight of law enforcement. This could land you in trouble and actually could be potentially dangerous. So always use OSINT and reconnaissance tactics wisely and intelligently. Make sure if you're doing any form of OSINT and intelligence gathering for your work, that it's in compliance with your operations. You're not going on the dark web and things like that. Anyway, I have to say this stuff because people might go and do things that could end up getting them in trouble. So just be mindful that as a security professional, you're operating in the bounds of law, where threat actors, they don't. So just keep that in mind, and thank you for listening.